She actually wrote, she said, I'm dying.
Rachel Scott, the first to be gunned down at Columbine. Yet the year before she died, she wrote, "This will be my last year, Lord. Thank you."
We were stunned.
And after her death, that horrible day in 1999, her dad's phone rang.
I got a phone call from a man I'd never met, and he said, I don't know why I'm having this dream, but I wanted to talk to someone in Rachel's family just to see if maybe it meant something.
The dreams, the signs, Rachel's words.
I personally believe there's a divine touch to her story, because otherwise I can't explain it.
This is Rachel's story, triumph over tragedy.
There was a student here with a gun. He had shot out a window. Okay, has anybody been injured, ma'am? Okay.
April 20th, 1999 is one of those dates in history.
And the school was in a panic, and I was in the library. I got students down under the table, hands under the table.
You know where you were when you heard about what was then the worst school shooting in U.S. history.
We have paramedics, we have fire, and we have police on route.
And in this never-before-seen video, you can feel the agony of parents like Daryl Scott, waiting and watching and wondering. Would their child step off a school bus, their name be posted on a list as a survivor, or be a victim of a crime that would rock our world forever? Today, Columbine High School is thriving. No obvious signs of the tragedy that ended with 13 people gunned down. No signs, except for the memorial that sits next to the school, a place of peace and some consolation to help our community heal. I'm Ann Trujillo. I grew up in Littleton. I covered the Columbine tragedy, and I will never forget how we were all left hurting, and like you, left wondering what we as a community could do to make sure this kind of tragedy never, ever happens again. Denver 7 is partnering with Rachel's Challenge, our way of honoring the lives lost that day and being a catalyst for change in our Colorado community. It starts with the story of Rachel Scott, a lively 17-year-old always looking for ways to make people smile.
All right, well, before we can use a vending machine, first we have to find money.
Rachel was a writer. She kept diaries filled with words of inspiration, and some would say premonition. Rachel's family has found a way to take her words and use them to inspire millions around the world to start a chain reaction called Rachel's Challenge. You may not know about Rachel's Challenge. Chances are your kids do. It took her death to start that chain and her father to share her words and carry on her legacy.
It wasn't something I planned. As I began to share Rachel's story, I realized the impact that it was having on other people.
Daryl Scott found purpose and healing in talking about his daughter, and the invitations to speak just kept coming, and he kept saying yes. On the road 200 days a year, a way to keep Rachel's memory alive and to pay tribute to the other victims of Columbine.
In the early days, it was really hard, but because we were seeing the results we were seeing, I knew that I didn't have a choice. This was something that we had to do.
When he tells Rachel's story, people listen. Student groups, business groups, even prison inmates stop.
And the inmates are in tears. We have, tough murderers stand up bawling like a baby saying, I'm calling my daughter. For the first time in 20 years. I haven't talked to her for 20 years.
What is it about this message, Daryl? What is it that resonates with people?
I don't even know if I can answer that. I personally believe there's a divine touch to her story, because otherwise I can't explain it.
The year before the Columbine shooting, Rachel wrote down these words: "This will be my last year, Lord. I've gotten what I can. Thank you." She even told her close friends she would die young.
She was very explicit with some of them. She actually wrote, she said, I'm dying. Slowly my soul leaves, my body withers. It isn't suicide, I consider it homicide. The world you have created has led to my death.
And Daryl shares the words her family found on the back of her dresser in her bedroom, inside her handprint, where the then 13-year-old Rachel had written, These hands belong to Rachel Joyce Scott and will someday touch millions of people's hearts.
She wrote that she would die young, but she also wrote that her life would reach millions of lives, and the outline of her hands that she drew. These hands will touch the hearts of millions of people. And that's happened.
And that wasn't all that moved the Scott family. It was the words Rachel put down on a paper called My Ethics, My Codes of Life, a paper her father and sister found.
Bethany and I sat down and read it. It was a month after Rachel died, so we were crying as we read it and thought this is the essence of who she was.
In that paper, Rachel challenged others to do 5 things. Look for the best in others, dare to dream, choose positive influences, use kind words, and start a chain reaction of kindness.
She was always for the underdog, and the stories we began to hear at her funeral of the kids that she reached out to just confirmed what we already knew about her.
Rachel's funeral was broadcast on CNN. Millions watched and cried with the rest of us. That's where story after story was told about Rachel. Stories her own family didn't even know. How Rachel went out of her way at school, reaching out to special needs students, new students, students who were picked on.
She was never ever afraid of being her own person. That's what she wanted to be. And I always admired that strength that she had.
And then this happened.
6 weeks after Rachel's funeral, I got a phone call from a man I'd never met. His name was Frank. And he lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he said, Mr. Scott, you don't know me, we've never met, but he said, I've had something happen to me over the last 2 weeks that I can't explain. I've had a reoccurring dream for the last 2 weeks, and I have the same dream night after night. And I've told my family about it. I don't know why I'm having this dream, but I wanted to talk to someone in Rachel's family just to see if maybe it meant something.
I had this vision of the eyes of a girl, of a sweet girl, and out of those eyes were coming tears, and the tears were pouring to the ground, and something was beginning to grow out of the ground. Life was coming out of the ground.
And I told him, I'm sorry, Frank, that doesn't mean anything. And he said, would you please just write my name and phone number down and call me if it ever does.
It was a week later when the Scott family got a call from the Jeffco Sheriff's Department that they had Rachel's backpack ready to be picked up. A backpack the Scotts keep to this day in their home in what they call Rachel's Corner. Along with other memories of Rachel, there sits her backpack, the bullet hole still in it, Rachel's blood still on it. And that's when the most incredible thing of all happened.
I took out some of her school books, and there at the bottom was her final diary. I wanted to see the last thing Rachel had written. And I was just stunned because, I mean, think about it. You get a call from a man 1,500 miles away who says, I've had a dream, and he describes exactly what I'm looking at on the last page of my daughter's diary. And I counted the clear teardrops. There's 13 clear tears. And then they turn to dark drops. And it suddenly dawned on me, there's 13 people were killed at Columbine. Later I found out she drew this just before she was killed.
That's what Rachel drew the morning of April 20th, 1999, sitting in Mrs. Carruthers' class at Columbine High School.
Mrs. Carruthers said, Rachel, that's beautiful, what is it? And she said, Rachel really didn't answer me. She looked at me and said, Mrs. Carruthers, I'm going to have an impact on the world.
You put all those things together, and you can see why there was just something to Rachel's story that it had to get out. Rachel wrote, I have this theory that if one person can go out of their way to show compassion, then it will start a chain reaction of the same. People will never know how far a little kindness can go. When we come back, how Rachel's story is going far and saving lives.
If you've ever seriously thought about committing suicide as a way to deal with your life, please cross the line.